Okay, so we're up to day 160 of going through my old journal. So the quote for today says, "Good thoughts bear good fruit. What kind of fruit does your tree bear? Do you have more bad thoughts than good, or vice versa? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts producing in your life?" So if you're following along, just take a minute to think about how you might respond to this. And I will read what I wrote. So let's see. I said I wouldn't label the majority of my thoughts as being either good or bad. I feel like they're mostly just random thoughts about things, mostly curiosity, I guess. Actually, this is sort of weird for me to think about what I think about. I mean, sometimes I may have negative thoughts about myself or others, but it's really not that often. When I think of others, it's mostly focused on what they're talking about or doing, not necessarily them as a person. Often, if they're doing or saying something bad, I don't necessarily think bad thoughts about them. I more so think about what's driving them to do the bad thing. In terms of the quote, I do think good thoughts are more productive than dwelling in bad thoughts, and I'd probably be better off by thinking more good thoughts, but number one, I'm not really sure how to do that. And number two, I'd worry that actively forcing myself to think good thoughts may not be a good thing. Like it could lead to unrealistic expectations or being taken advantage of. So yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I think I've kind of mentioned this a couple of times, but I don't think it's good to always like force yourself into thinking positive or only seeing the good. I think it is good to some extent. Like it's way better than just focusing on the negative. But I worry, and this has been around for a long time. Like the law of attraction stuff has been around for a long time. And I think it's good to some extent to kind of think about what you want and kind of envision that. And if you keep like what you want, your goals on your mind, I think you are more likely to work towards those goals. And, you know, I think having a positive mindset is better than having a negative mindset all the time. But I kind of think it's better to balance it a little bit. Like I've mentioned before that when I go into things, I'm not always going into it in the mindset of like, I'm going to win, I'm going to do this, like everything's going to be great. I always have in my mind, it's prepared for the opposite. For instance, when I just did my most recent, my little workout challenge thing, I wanted to be in the top 10. I was hoping I would be in the top 10, but at the same time, I was kind of mentally prepared to not be in the top 10. And I didn't make it in the top 10. I didn't win the competition. So if I would have been like kind of that positive thinking, law of attraction, you're going to do this, you can do this, I feel like I may have been let down, you know, and gotten more down on myself when that didn't happen. And I could see a lot of people in the group were starting to feel like that pretty early on. I think starting out, because there was a Facebook group along with this like workout challenge, and there was a bunch of people comparing themselves to other people, and it was kind of like their motivation for doing the contest was to win. And once they got to a point that they didn't think they were going to win, when they were seeing like the results of other people and comparing themselves to that, and when the motivation, if their motivation was to win, they got, you know, it demotivated them when they thought they weren't going to win, and so they quit. And so my motivation wasn't necessarily to win, it was just to do the best that I could, and I feel like I did, and so I was happy with my results. Would I have liked to be in the top 10? Yeah. Would I have liked to have won? Absolutely. But like I had kind of like prepared myself for failure, and I don't think that like held me back. I don't know, maybe if I would have had this mindset of like, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna win, maybe I would have pushed harder and maybe I would have gotten the top 10, but I don't know. I feel like pushing harder, I would have like neglected other things in my life, and then I think overall it wouldn't have been like the best thing. But I don't know. That's just how I feel. I think it is good. I think it is good to have good thoughts. I think it is good to see good in the world and good in other people, but I think you've also got to be realistic and not just kind of like cloud everything over as being good, because at some point there might be a reality check, and if you're kind of like in this delusion of everything's going to be great, everything's going to work out, and then it comes like crashing down, then that could be pretty devastating. And I feel like we're seeing this a little bit with I don't know if I want to get into this, but like recently there's been a lot of these people with very big egos who have had, I think, that mindset of like, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to win. And it did work to convince other people to kind of support what they were doing. But so I guess what I'm talking about in particular is what's his name? SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried. And even Elon Musk to some extent. I think he's had this mindset of like, I'm going to win, I'm a winner, like no matter what, and they lose track of the fact that maybe they just think that any decisions that they make are just going to be good and everything's going to turn out great and everything's going to turn out right, and it leads to them like not making the best decisions and not, but just still thinking that everything's going to be okay and not really living in reality, and then getting kind of a reality check when things don't just turn out. And the same thing for like the Theranos lady. I don't know how to feel about that. Like, on the one hand, like with Steve Jobs, it kind of worked out because he was just like, I have this goal and I'm going to do it. And no matter what, I'm going to push everybody. And this is just going to happen. Like, personal computers are going to happen. And, he was able to push through. And I feel like the Theranos lady was having that same thought. She's like, everybody says it's not possible. We're going to make it possible. It's going to happen. Don't take no for an answer, whatever. And it doesn't always like turn out that way. Sometimes what you want to do is not feasible. I don't know, this is getting off track. We're just talking about good thoughts, bad thoughts. I think it is good to see positive, but be realistic. Be realistic about it, I guess, is the main thing that I think has been beneficial for me. Be optimistic, but also be realistic. So anyway, that's all I have for that. I'll be back tomorrow with day 161.